You're listening to Queering Premodern Asia, a limited series by the Nuances podcast. Episode 0, In Search of Our Queer Asian Roots, an introduction. Hello everyone, my name is Azu. I am your host and producer for this series. I host the Nuances podcast about our Asian stories. Although the series is about queerness, I am cis and straight. Now you might be wondering, why is a cis woman doing a show about queerness? Excellent question. First off, I'm not doing this alone. I'll be joined by guest co-hosts from the queer Asian community, some of whom you've already met, as well as influential academics studying these topics. It is never my goal to speak for the queer community, but rather to elevate the voices and stories of the community. So if at any point I say something that you find problematic, please reach out to me. I do my best, but I know I'm not perfect and I might make mistakes and I want to do better, so please don't hesitate. Now, to understand why I'm doing this, here is some background. The idea for this series came about a year ago, inspired by my interviews with the queer Asian community. Many of the guests shared a desire to connect more with their culture, but also a feeling of being rejected by it because of their queerness. For example, here's Cece from Season 1, Episode 7, talking about becoming the black sheep of the family after coming out as trans, and having trouble explaining that grief to white peers.
I am not just me, I am my family, and my family is me. And so a lot of queer Asian people can't come in the closet because they're like, I'm going to lose me, I'm going to lose everything. And in white queer spaces, people will be like, F your family, just be you and be yourself. You're amazing. You don't understand what you are asking me to give up. You're asking me to give up me. It's not just this group of people. It's this really big part of me. And I don't know who I am or what I am apart from them.
Queer representation in the media has primarily centered white narratives, which is often not relatable to queer Asians, like Josh explains in Season 1, Episode 6.
I know that people have their own connections to these particular parts of media or these movies, but like every time like another story about a white teenager who comes out who's embraced by their family, I'm like, I never had that. Where's the story about the Asian that's coming out, right?
A lot of families see queerness as a Western concept that is incompatible with their Asian heritage or cultural tradition, especially the part of our culture that expects us to get married and have kids. Here's Travis on Season 3, Episode 6.
She still thinks that homosexuality is something of the heart, right? Like, you can feel things for people of the same sex or the same gender, but you still have to marry a woman and have kids. I think it's a mix between recognizing that people do have same-sex attractions, but you still have some sort of piety to your ancestors to continue the lineage that it still sticks with her.
I actually found out that how Travis's parents view his being gay is actually not too far off from how our Chinese ancestors viewed male-male love, but our ancestors were not actually against being gay as our families might think today. You'll learn more about this on Episode 1 and 4 of the series. My queer Asian guests also feel like queer spaces aren't safe for them, as those are typically very white spaces and often have very overt anti-Asian sentiment. For example, here's an excerpt from Edmund's interview on Season 1, Episode 8.
But this was in the days of gay.com. I don't even know if that website still exists, but I'm not one to go to clubs. So I had an online profile, and as I started reading other people's profiles, the holy trinity of the gay profile in the 90s and early 2000s was no fats, no femmes, no Asians.
What?
So if you are going to respond to somebody or send them a message, you can't be fat, so fat phobia, no femmes, so no feminine men, and no Asians. They would not communicate with an Asian person. And that has been my entire out life.
Another issue our queer Asian community faces is fetishization as well as misogyny in their Asian family circles. Here's an excerpt from Sally, Season 1, Episode 9.
I'm both trying to navigate any kind of Orientalism lens being placed on me and trying to avoid that in the North American context and in East Asian and in Chinese context specifically, like also trying to resist inheriting 5,000 years of sexism.
For some of my guests, it was religion, more specifically Christianity, that made it hard for their parents to accept their queerness. This is from Danny, Season 3, Episode 5.
Because my parents are Christian people, they said that because of Jesus and their relationship with God and the church, if I had a girlfriend, they would support me, but they'd never truly accept it. which sucked. And it felt like they were committing to not knowing me and committing to not accept a part of me, which I still honestly struggle with.
Another theme I also picked up in those conversations is how lonely it was for them as young people trying to navigate their queerness. Here's Tony from Season 1, Episode 3.
There weren't a lot of openly queer people in my life, so I just had to be the person who was queer. And that was really hard.
I was really struck by how little I knew of these experiences. As a straight woman, I lived decades completely oblivious of these experiences. But the more I heard, the more I wanted to encourage my fellow straight folks to be curious, to care, and to engage with these stories. One day, I was scrolling on TikTok when I saw a video about how in 1651 there was a Chinese play that featured lesbian characters. It immediately piqued my interest. If that story was out there and it was a hit in 1651, what else is out there? Could history bridge the gap between our current diasporic experience and conversations that seem too futuristic for our parents? More importantly, what if we could validate the idea that queerness and cultural pride aren't alien concepts, but in fact are intertwined in our past? And thus began the journey. The thing is, sexual diversity was super common in pre-modern Asia, but that history has been buried. Academics in the last few decades have started to uncover some of these stories, but how the heck would you know that most of the Chinese emperors had documented male favorite lovers in the historical records? Yep, you heard me right. In the official historical records, there were chapters about who the favorite male lover was for the emperor. Oh, and get this, even pre-modern Chinese porn included gay scenes. Okay, now I have your attention, don't I? So how many of those stories are out there, and why were they buried, and by whom? Can we even use terms like lesbian, gay, or even queer in those contexts? How come they weren't able to erase all the history? So many questions, so little time to cover them all. Come with me on this quest to find the truth about our queer Asian roots. Trust me, this series is not your average boring history lecture. History was my least favorite subject in high school because the people teaching it focus on the least interesting parts, like the exact dates that the British and the French battled over this and that land. But I promise you, we'll make this history of sexual diversity in pre-modern Asia so fun that you'll never guess that I read like 100 academic articles and books to make it happen. Oh yeah, I'm not making all this up. All the stories I'll be sharing are from academic sources, and I will link those in the full show notes. But the point is to present this material in a way that isn't full of jargon, but that is still based in research. Another reason I'm making this series is simply because I enjoy doing this work and I had the resources and time to put into it. I may be a cis straight person, but I find this topic utterly fascinating. And I know for a fact that I'm not the only one. It has made me question a lot of my preconceived notions, and I hope it will do so for many of my fellow cis straight folks as well as queer folks too. Again, this is not to say that we should go back to the ways of our ancestors. There's a lot of weird stuff that they were doing that we're not about that anymore. Rather, it's an exercise in stretching our imagination around queerness and how we approach conversations about queerness and queer rights today. For my queer Asian listeners, I hope that this series will help you feel more connected to your Asian roots and that these stories will bring hope and healing as you laugh and cry with us on this journey. For my fellow straight folks, I hope it makes you curious to learn more and maybe go back and listen to the interviews I've done with the queer community on nuancespod.com. Because I don't think creating a society that is more inclusive of queer folks should fall squarely on the queer community's shoulders. In a society where cis-hetero folks like us are the norm, we'd get much further faster if more of us pitched in however we could, no? Just like we need male feminists, we need straight folks who advocate for the queer community and help the community. And we can start by listening. And for the activists and educators listening, I hope this series helps you reflect on the language you use in your activism and whether it perpetuates Orientalist tropes and how we might do better together. To give you all a taste of what's to come, here are the titles of the first 6 episodes. Number 1, In Search of Prince Charming and His King. Episode 2, But Where Are the Lesbians? Episode 3, 50 Shades of Gender. Episode 4, Love, Marriage, and Their Casual Relationship. Episode 5, Gods, Sex, and the Patriarchy. Episode 6, The West, Savior or Demonizer? I have a few more bonus episodes which I will announce later. Some of the common themes that came up during my research was that the current Western framework we use to understand and fight for queer rights, the use of the LGBTQIA+ terms, often don't map quite neatly onto other cultures or other eras. There's also the fact that in the West, queerness is seen as part of your core identity, especially in modern times. But this was not the case in pre-modern Asia at all. Who you slept with did not put you in a different gay category. Another one is that we think of lesbians as the female version of gays. That equivalence also did not exist. In some cultures, the English language doesn't have the appropriate terms to describe their gender constructs. I learned so much from researching this series, and I can't wait for you to go on that journey too. Queering Premodern Asia drops June 2nd, 2024, which is next week. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to nuancespod.com to learn more. There's also links to all the platforms there, so you can find your favorite one to follow us on. You can also find us on social media at nuancespod.